God. What in the world is God? A lot of people pray to God. A lot of people say God is in them, talks to them. Okay, so we start here. We start with atheism. Who is an atheist? Atheist is a person who claims that he does not believe in the existence of God. That's essentially it. He believes there is no God out there. Okay, and by the way, I do clarify all the time that I was an atheist for most of my life. Okay, I was brought up in an atheist environment. My folks were militant atheists. They were not just middle of the road atheists. They were among the first contributors to American Atheists when it started out in Baltimore over there. We lived there at the time, and we were friends with Madeline Murray O'Hare, who later on was murdered a few years later. Anyways, so I come from an atheist background. And the first thing I want to say, I'm no longer an atheist. In fact, they are my number one enemies. So I changed side. But did I go to the other side? Did I become a religious? Am I a Christian? Am I a Muslim, Buddhist, or a Hindu? No, absolutely not. No, I consider all those religions. In fact, I'm not even sure we can call atheism a religion. I think it's irrationality. Okay, and we'll get to that in a second. But let me show you this. So no, I'm what is called a scientist. And a scientist is not an atheist. Science goes completely against atheism, antheism, and agnosticism, against all three of them. Okay, why? We'll find out. But here, let's start with this, and this I found this week. So this is what an atheist does. This is an atheist dog. Okay, by the way, the word dog is the opposite of the word God. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, but here is, this is what a dog does, an atheist dog does. Okay, and he says, none I see, I mistake for a tree. That's the atheist dog. Okay. So what's the issue? Why am I not an atheist? What are atheists? Why do I object to atheism and agnosticism, by the way, because a lot of agnosticists are also, in a sense, atheists. They'd rather not believe than believe, okay? So I put them, essentially all of them, in the same boat, together with theists, more or less, okay? So here it is. Okay, this is the rundown. Okay, atheism, the religion of the mathematicians, okay? It's the religion of mathemagics. It's the mathematical physicists who talk about atheism and spread the religion of atheism. What's wrong with atheism? Well, it has to do with belief. That's what's wrong with atheism. Atheism harps on belief because the so-called scientific method of the mathematicians is irrational. It's an irrational system method, okay? And because of that, they concluded that science is about belief, that science is about opinion. And that's what they harp on. They try to convince you, they try to persuade you that they are right, that they are correct. That's what it's all about. And that's not what science is about. That's an irrational scientific method. We do not have opinions in science. We do not have beliefs. In science, we explain a mechanism objectively so that you understand it, and that's where science stops. What continues is religion. And so what do the mathematicians harp on? They harp on evidence, proof, knowledge, verification, verify what the experiment the other guy ran. And what do you learn from that? You learn the description. You say, okay, I'll verify that the pencil, falls to the floor. Okay, I verified it. Repeatable experiment, just do it again, and so you got at least two instances, two experiments. Now you can say it's scientific. So you verified. What did you verify? A description. You can even say, well, how fast it went, or what's the acceleration. Doesn't matter. You can measure all that and verify all that. Still, you have no explanation. You have no mechanism for what caused the pencil or pen to fall to the floor rather than to the ceiling consistently. So that's where the problem is. And so they harp on persuasion, convincing, converting, and recruiting. They try to persuade you that they are correct, that they are right, that they have proof. And this comes from mathematics, where they prove equations, like this equation gives you that result and so on, and it describes a certain action. So it's got to do with that, with what the word proof means in mathematics. In science, we have no proof, because proof means I convinced you, I twisted your arm and made you think the way I do. That's what proof means. Okay, and once you have proof, you have knowledge, and once you have knowledge, you have nothing more to learn. Correct? In other words, now nobody can convince you otherwise because you know. And that's all there is. So no, knowledge belongs to religion. In science, we do not know. Science has nothing to do with knowledge. Science has to do with explanation and understanding. And that's where science stops. What continues is known as religion. Knowledge, proof, evidence doesn't belong in science at all. Okay, so what's the issue? The issue is that related to God, right? is that they never defined the word exist. A mathematician, an atheist, okay, has never defined the word exist. So it remains an undefined term even to this day. What they have is synonyms, which is a circular definition. You'll find these synonyms in the dictionaries: living, to be, being, actual, real, reality, stuff like that. Those are all synonyms, because when you look up those words, actuality, reality, whatever, you'll find the word exist in there, the word being. It's just a circular, the whole thing is circular. You won't find a definition. What do you mean by exist? And no one in the last 3,000 years defined the word exist. And so atheists are in that boat, and they use the word exist without having defined it. They don't know exactly what they mean by exist. They say, well, you know what I mean by exist. No, I don't. Well, please define the word exist. And so we have an unspecified situation here. Is God an object or a concept? Okay, and object is that which has shape. So does God have shape or not? So we have two issues related to God, and here are the two issues. Okay, this is in my book. People say, God, why did you name it why God doesn't exist? And people focus on the word God, and they should be focusing on the word exist. Okay, I defined the word exist for the first time in history. I'm not bragging here, I'm just stating a fact. Nobody ever defined the word exist, so nobody knows what they mean when they say God exists or God doesn't exist. So I don't know whether God exists or not. They never defined the word exist, so they don't know what they're saying. And I'm saying you have to define the word exist so that we understand what you're saying when you say God exists or God doesn't exist. Okay, and so these are the two questions of God related to physics. Because people say, why are you bringing the word God into physics? I thought that belonged in religion. No, it's the word exist that we're concerned about. It's the word object that we're concerned about. And you got to tell me whether God is an object first, and if God is an object, a thing, then if God exists or not. And if God is a concept, well, you're going to have a hard time. And here it is God an object or a concept, and does God exist? Those are the two issues of God related to physics. That's why we bring them into physics, because the word exist belongs exclusively to physics. Physics is the science of existence. That's what the book has to do with. Okay, and yeah, I do talk about God. I think the last chapter, 10 chapters, the last one. But that's not the issue. The issue with God is whether he exists or not, whether he's an object, whether he's a thing. And I should say whether God is an object, whether God is a thing. That's what you got to tell me. And if you approach a Christian, a Muslim, Hindu, whatever, out there, Orthodox Christian of Greeks or Russians or whatever, any religion that has this God out there, you have to ask them only one question, and you'll stump them. I know, because I've tried it already many times. And you ask them, is God an object or a concept? An object that which has shape. A concept is that which does not have shape. Does God have shape? Does God not have shape? That's the only issue. And the guy will go bonkers. That's essentially what it is. Okay, and so this is the question. Okay, is God an object or a concept? If God is an object, then you would say, well, he looks like a man. He's got arms, legs, he's got a belly button, maybe he's got a mother, I don't know. Or maybe he's a bush. If you read the Bible, the Old Testament, you'll find the flaming bush story. Moses, he came up against the flaming bush, and it was God talking to him from the bush. So you could say that God is a bush, that's fine. No problem. You pray to a bush, no problem. I can deal with it, okay? As long as it's an object, we're no problem. But if God is a concept, love, intelligence, God is energy. He's a spirit. It is a spirit, I should say. God is a spirit. God is soul. God is time. God is talking to me. Okay? God is consciousness. Maybe you're just dreaming, talking to yourself. You think, oh, God is in there. Okay? Omniscience, goodness, etc. Alpha and Omega. If God is a concept, then we have a problem, because you can't talk about the existence of God, because no concept can be said to exist. Not in science. Not in a rational way. You can only say it in ordinary speech, in mathematics, in all those religions. You can say whatever you want. If you're going to try to prove the existence of God, a lot of Christians are into that, Christians and Muslims as well. Okay, come on over. But now you step the line into physics. Now you're going to have to follow certain rules. You're going to have to define the word exist, and the word exist says that only objects can exist, and they exist only if they have location. And if you're a Christian, you might say, well, I don't like any of those definitions, Bill. No problem. Give me your definitions that you can use consistently in a rational way. Okay? Now, I got an answer from people in a conference where I was. They were from Palestinians. We went to lunch together, and they were all religious. And so I asked them the question, is God an object or a concept? One guy said, well, I think he's an object. The other guy says, I think he's a concept. The other guy said, well, I don't know. And the other guy says, if I knew what God was, he would be so great. So these are the kind of answers you're going to get. Of course, they can't define it because they're going to step on their own toes. If they say he's an object, then he can't talk about love and intelligence or consciousness or anything like that. If he says he's a concept, well, God doesn't exist by definition because you have to have an object, and so on down the line. And if God is an object and he exists, well, exist means that he's got shape and he's got location within the universe, meaning you should be able to establish distance, meaning location of God with respect to you. There's got to be a straight line of direction from God to me, his chest to my chest. And then you can say he exists by definition because God has a human figure, no problem, anthropomorphic God. And God has location because there's distance between my chest and God's. So with definitions alone, you prove, right, that God exists. But then you have to live with it. You know, God now exists and you have to deal with God. He can't be outside the universe. He can't be in the fifth dimension. None of that nonsense. He can't be time, right, synonym of time. So it's not so easy to say, oh, God is out there, you know. Okay, so let's see. Give me a second here. So yeah, God the object, God only an object can exist, be said to exist, and that when an object is defined as that which has shape. Okay, exist, physical presence, meaning an object plus location. Okay, so God can only said to exist if he's an object, and then that's not enough. He's got to have, in addition, he's got to have location. Okay, what's happened here all these years? Well, if you were to go back in time, you know, time travel, Einstein-like, you take the time tunnel train and you go 2,000, 3,000 years ago, those people, those predecessors, those forefathers that we had, they actually believed that God was a human-like figure, anthropomorphic God. That's what they believed. And that's what they put in the books. You know, look at the Bible, look at some of these others, like I talked about the Tripitaka a little bit the other day for the Buddhists. They actually believe that there were human-like figures out there, transcendental human-like figures that intervene in human affairs. They actually believe that. Well, that's been whittled down over the years. That's diluted over the years. And what's happened really is that today, especially the young people, they don't believe in that anthropomorphic God. So when you say, well, do you believe in God? You say, yeah, I do believe in God. Okay, so what is God? And they say, well, God is love. God is intelligent. They give you all these concepts. So the famous God, who was an anthropomorphic guy with, you know, hands and magic wand and so on, that guy more or less is fading away, if not disappeared almost completely in the minds of many religious folk today. And what you see is this, you know, you have, on the one hand, you have concepts, on the other side, you have objects. And you have God, angels, spirits, you know, Casper the Friendly Ghost. All those had shape. They imagined them as things that floated in the air, you know, that unseen things. But they said, yeah, God of the wind, you know, Aeolus, he blows, and that's the wind. You know, so they had an explanation for why there was wind. There's this God that blows, and you had the God of the seas, Poseidon, and so on. They had all these gods, God of the underworld, you know, Hades. Okay, so we had all these gods. Then they morphed them into one God. You know, the next generation of religious people, they put them into one God. And today that God, that physical God, has, for the most part, disappeared. You know, even many pastors, they'll talk about God, but they'll say God is love, and they go to the New Testament, which is more abstract than the Old Testament. The New Testament talks about love and God is spirit. The Old Testament said, no, God is a guy that's got, you know, hands, arms, and he wills certain things. I can pray to him because he's got a mind, you know. He's another human up there, essentially made us in his image, you know, and so on. So they actually believed in the true God, in a God, you know, made like a man and not a woman. He was a man, no doubt about that either. Okay, he was male. But that God has been whittled down over the years, and now we have another situation. And here, let me show you what's happened. Okay, what they did with God, they put him in the other group. Okay, so here you have the God and the angel, and they're moving to the other side. Okay, so poor God, you know, he used to be on one side, and suddenly he went to the other side. Okay, and did it stop there? No, the mathematicians did something different. Well, really, they did the first part the same. They took the particle, okay, which is their God, the God they've been praying to for the last 400 years. They took the particle, and they also moved it to the other side. Let me show you that, okay? So the particle was there, okay, and it started moving to the other side. See if I get this guy out. Give me a second here. Okay, the particle started moving to the other side. And you say, well, what happened there? You know, and yeah, these objects, these things, the corpuscle, they went to the side of the concept. And so God, angels, spirits, all that in religion, but in the religion of mathematics, right? The real particle, you know, the corpuscle, with quantum mechanics, it also went to the side of the concept. It became an abstract concept. You know, now you're not talking about a particle. Now you're talking about an excited field or a wave function collapse. What is that? What do you mean a wave function collapse? What has collapsed? What a physical object has collapsed? A wave function. What's a function? It's a mathematical concept. So we have all these numbers and they collapse, and that's the so-called particle. So the particle is no longer the particle that we used to have. Okay, that's changed. Okay, did we stop there? Well, in the case of mathematics, okay, the gods of mathematics, okay, you know, they not only got rid of the particle, meaning they moved it to the side of the concept, but they did something else. They started moving all these other concepts. They moved them to the other side. They converted them into objects, exactly the reverse. And here you see how they went to the other side, okay? So we had all those that were objects went to concepts, and all those that were concepts went to objects. That's what we have today. So if you talk to anyone today about, you know, God, he might talk to you about concepts, abstractions. He might say, no, God is love, God is intelligence. He's not a he. We call him a he anyways, but he's not a he. What he is, or God is love, intelligence, some abstraction, grace. You know, these words, these are the words you'll hear out there. The particle from mathematics, their God also went to the concept side. The particle became a concept. So whenever you hear the word particle, you're thinking about a little ball, a little speck of dust. Absolutely not. The particle of today, for the last 100 years, is no longer the particle. It's an abstract concept. What happened to all the concepts of the 19th century that they said, well, these are concepts, you know, mathematical concepts? They moved them into objects. They treat them as objects. So all these gods, the God of energy, the God of field, God of mass, you know, gravity, force, charge, plasma, vortex in the case of the electric universe, all these are treated as physical objects. Not one of these is a physical object, including the ether. All these are concepts. And yes, unless you understand the difference between an object and a concept, you're going to have a million questions. And that's where we are today. All these people really believe that they're moving objects around and they're, you know, juggling concepts. That's what they're doing. Okay, so what can I say? That's the situation today. Now I can give you here the conclusions. Okay, here we have it. As long as God was a magician, we were okay. And as long as he was a bush, flaming or otherwise, you know, just standing still, we were okay, because now we knew what God is. When the magician and the bush converted into concepts, we no longer had a what. Now we have a concept, and a concept is not a what. And on the other side, they have all these gods. They have the Higgs, they call it the God particle, okay? And that's a concept, because you think of it as a particle with a big H on its back. Not true, okay? The Higgs is not a particle, a corpuscle, a speck of dust, a grain of sand, you know, a seed. None of those. No, nothing even like that. It's a number. That's what it is. A bunch of numbers in some cases, but vibrating numbers convert into one number, and that's called a Higgs, a little particle. Strings, they're made out of one-dimensional lines, if you can ever conceptualize that. And the famous one, the 4D canvas of general relativity, unimaginable, as Mr. Stephen Hawking said. And what is it? It's just a mixture of space and time. What is time? Time is a concept. So obviously, we're not talking about a physical object. Despite that, the mathematicians bend, warp this abstract concept. Good luck with that one. You'll need a lot of beers to understand that one.